Well, she's faced criticism from members of the HART board, but praise from members of the Honolulu City Council. Today, HART CEO Lori Kahikina joins us here in studio.
Plus, Natalie Iwasa, HART board member, along with John Nouchi from the City Transportation Services Department is here to talk about how Skyline is going now. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, aloha, and thanks for tuning in here for another episode of Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now. We want to welcome in HART CEO Lori Kahikina. Lori, thank you so much for joining us here. A lot to talk about. Yes. First, want to just start off talking about where things are at right now with your role. We talked about and we led in that you have received some pushback from members of the HART board and a really public exchange that caught the attention of many. How would you describe the overall dynamics right now with where you're at in your capacity as the leader of this project and members of the HART board?
Wow. Went right to the heart. I thought we were going to talk about project updates, but okay, we can go straight there. It's honestly, it's very stressful. And it's not just stressful for me, but it's stressful for my team, even the stakeholders. And, you know, one of the, like you said, there was a pretty public altercation, I guess I'll say, between myself and the board chair. I wish it wasn't so public, but actually you're going to be talking to Natalie soon, and Natalie was the one that actually brought it to light. People weren't really watching the board meeting, and she brought it up at the city council. And her main reason for that was we have one of our largest and last procurement out there on the street, our city center guideway station procurement, and you know, it's not helpful. It's not helpful to show the strife between the board and HART. And so she just wanted to get it out there because if the bids do come in higher, you know, they're going to bid in risk because they don't know what's happening with the HART leadership. She wanted it out there in the public that don't be blaming Lori. I mean, of course, I'm part of it, but don't be putting all the blame on the CEO. The HART board is part of it. So it is very stressful. I just had a all-hands meeting with my team on Monday, and it is a point of topic. What's happening, boss? What's happening with you? And I honestly don't know.
And so for those folks who haven't been paying close attention to this, just for a little background for our audience, your contract is up at the end of the year. It has not been renewed. It continues to get deferred meeting after meeting. What have you been told about why this decision is being delayed?
Nothing. There's no discussion with me whatsoever. I don't know when it's going to be put on the agenda. I don't know when it's going to be deferred until, like everyone else, finds out when the meeting is actually happening. So that's the message I'm telling my staff. I'm telling you as much as I know, watch the board meetings because that's when I find out.
And what has there been any other exchanges or communication with, you know, as we mentioned, the board chair, which is Colleen Hanabusa, have there been any discussions between you and her since this time to maybe address some of the concerns that were brought up during this discussion?
There's no outside discussions other than what's at the board meetings.
Well, one of the areas of contention is recruitment and retention. So let's talk about those numbers right now. The criticism is that you're not able to keep the employees that you need to keep, that there's been an exodus of some high-level employees, and you haven't been able to hire. In what way do you think this delay on your contract is influencing your ability to recruit and retain your staff?
So it's critical for the higher-level positions. And so, for example, our chief financial officer and Rick Keene, my deputy, from the day one, he made it clear, Lori, I'm only there for 12 months to 18 months to support you, but I've dragged it on for about 3.5 years now. But in the beginning of the year or end of last year, he said, Lori, I really need to retire summertime. Said, okay, great. And then our project director, Nate, did leave. And unfortunately, it was discussed publicly at the board meeting. His father-in-law is fighting cancer, and then when he made the announcement, subsequent to that, his mother passed away too. So they made a family decision to move to the mainland, and that's what the blow up was. The board is very, they felt I didn't do enough to try and keep the project director, but we have a succession plan. We have the deputy project director, which is Vance Suda. He's been on the project almost 9 years now. He's an electrical engineer. And so he became the project director, and under him is the director of design and construction, Matt Scanlon, who's been on the project 3 years. This is his second stint. He was here several years ago. We just recently promoted him to deputy project director. So it has worked out. Recruiting for my deputy, it just does not make sense right now because I have a very strong candidate, but I made it clear to him I might not be here next year. I just wanted to be open, honest, transparent with him. And he said, then what are we doing? I'm not coming over. I'm coming over to be your deputy. If you're not going to be here, there's no reason for us to continue the discussion. So at the deputy position and the CFO, it is very difficult. But as far as the rest of the team, I'm very proud of who we have. We do have recruitment problems like every other agency. When you look across the nation, you look just at Star Bulletin, Hawaii News Now, Civil Beat, Police Department was in the news recently, 911. It's across every industry, across the nation. Recruiting is very tough right now. But just because the board is honing in on the city positions, we have a staff of consultants that are augmented. So we have about 130 people at HART, seated at HART, that is delivering this project. And I'm very confident in them. They've been very successful since I've been there over the last 3.5 years. People come and go and we replace them. But they are working, to me, at a very high level, and I don't want to kill them. So we do have to bring in resources, especially as we get into the most difficult part of City Center Guideway Station. But make no bones about it, very proud of our team. They're capable, they are handling, we haven't dropped the ball yet, and I have every confidence they're going to be successful.
Well, as you say that you're having these discussions with people who could potentially come on as your deputy, but the uncertainty of your future lies there. Just plainly, do you want this job? Do you want to continue on with this project? Given the criticism that you're getting, some of the negativity that's coming from the HART board, is this a position that you're still interested and passionate about?
Wow, that's a good question. I seem to flip-flop every day because I'm a very dedicated government employee. I've been with the city almost 20 years now. And if you look at my track record, of course I'm dedicated to the city, to the project, to the taxpayers, but it's very stressful working in this kind of environment. It would be nice if everyone was collaborative, moving forward in the best interest of the project and the taxpayers, and I just don't feel that sometimes, honestly. So if that stress level is going to continue, then it would be difficult for me to want to stay. If it were subside and people work collaboratively, then yes. And of course, I don't want to let my team down. I don't want to let the taxpayers down. And so it's a loaded question.
Well, and it's interesting because in a position like this, you would launch an executive search, and usually, typically, not necessarily just for HART, but for any agency with a project of this financial magnitude, you would think that you'd hire a recruiting agency, and a search like this typically takes a year or even 18 months. Plus, there is the question of what you want to do and respecting your financial future if you're counting on being able to do this. And now I'm hearing you say, I don't even know if I want this. Give us a little bit of a sense of how you feel about how this is all being handled.
Yeah, I would wish it would be a little bit more positive, a little bit more collaborative. To be yelled at so publicly, that's not a good situation. I don't think anyone wants to work in that kind of environment. If it, like I said, more collaborative, of course I'm willing to stay. But if I'm going to get beat up like that, and I don't know when it's going to happen, it's like I shouldn't have to be, nobody should have to work like that on pins and needles every board meeting that you go to. It's not healthy.
We did say some of the criticism you got from, the board members, but several city council members have come out and have spoken out in your defense and have noted the work that you are doing. What are the conversations like with those members of the city council who are advocating for you and are trying to encourage you to continue to move on?
I can tell you when this happened at the board meeting, when the altercation happened, nobody picked up on it because no one was really watching the board meetings. And it wasn't until Natalie brought it up at city council, and she forewarned me. She tapped me on the shoulder and said, I'm going to bring this to light. I said, please don't. I just want the dust to settle because we have our city center guideway station procurement out on the street. The bidders are working on their bids right now. I don't want to bring any more attention to it. She goes, no. Like I said earlier, we need to put it on record that the board if the bids come in higher, the board is part of the problem too. So when she did that, I was at City Council that day, and I actually got pretty emotional. I had to leave the room. I went to the bathroom, and then one of my friends at the city, she's texting me. She says, "Natalie's defending you." I said, "Yeah, I know. I'm in the bathroom crying." But several council members reached out to me, and they were texting me saying, "We're in full support of you." One ran after me, and she says, the full council is in support of you, right? And I said, no, because nobody talks to me, so I don't know. I cannot make that assumption. So when they came out on the other day at the council meeting, second council meeting, to publicly, Esther Kiana started it, it's very touching and unplanned. I didn't know, just like when some of my employees came to the board member to support me, I didn't know that. I received several letters that they gave me a copy that was sent to the board executive officer. I'm not prompting this. I know the naysayers are saying that I'm asking them. I am not. And the naysayers could also say that, well, the employees are just trying to save their job, or it's a contractor that, of course, they want you to, they want to continue getting work from HART. But I did not prompt this, and I'm very touched that people are sending their support in for me.
What you just described about being yelled at and having this so public, would you characterize this as bullying, as workplace bullying?
And harassment, yes. It's not a respectful workplace, which the city has those policies. Non-workplace violence, non-hostile workplace, and respectful workplace, yes.
How do you, if you do decide to continue in this role and you have to maintain a relationship with the board as is, how do you move forward from this? How would you propose actually being able to get to that positive place that you're talking about?
That's a good question. I don't have a good answer to that. I guess that goes back to your previous question. Am I willing to stay? And not if I'm going to keep being bullying like that.
Let's talk about the overall project and where things are at right now with some critical moments. You talked about, the bid being out for this next segment, but I want to rewind back and just talk about the progress that you're making towards this Middle Street area. Are things continuing on track? We know that the mayor has set publicly a date and has had to put it out there that he wants that Middle Street portion, which includes the airport, to be open next year. How are things looking with that section?
Yes, so we are on track to hand this over to DTS by the end of next year. So we are right now working on the tracks, and we want to electrify that third rail by the July timeframe. So hopefully the public will see a train coming on that segment in July. That's exciting news. And they're going to take about a year to do the testing, just like we did on segment 1, and hopefully we can hand this over and open by the end of next year.
I'm interested, since you took this project on, how you think that it has changed leading this organization. Now you are on time, on track. When you took over, that was not the case. We'd seen years of delays and massive spending. Right. How do you feel like it's going? Have you sort of hit your stride, you personally, and then the rail overall?
Oh, absolutely. And of course, I rave about the HART team, the HART Ohana itself, which includes our city staff and consultants, but it's our stakeholders. There is no way we would have been able to make all of this progress without, we have the city department, state departments, HICO, Kamehameha schools, UH, everyone is helping us to move things along. When something gets stuck, I can easily call up one of the stakeholders, hey, I need your help, we're stuck here. And they come to help us. So I think we have like you said, a good stride. We always run into technical issues. Oh no, there's a utility there that's not supposed to be there. But our consultants, contractors, we're all in the same house at the HART offices, and we find a solution and move forward.
One of the other areas that, of course, this project has been criticized over was just the overall financing and funding. What can you tell us about the federal dollars that have now come in? Because that has made a significant impact. What is the latest you can update us on that budget and the money that was allocated that was received from that first tranche of money?
Right. So the full funding grant agreement is about $1.55 billion. HART has historically received the first $800 million. Haven't received any funds since 2017 because FTA lost confidence in us and in the project. So fast forward, amended the recovery, did a recovery plan, amended the full funding grants agreement, and we got the first tranche, the remaining $744 million, that $125 million, we actually got it in hand last month. And The next tranche is $250 million is slated when we award that city center guideway station contract, so hopefully before the end of this year. But it goes beyond just the money in hand. It goes to speaking to the confidence that we have reinstilled that relationship with FTA, that they now have confidence in the HART team and started the money coming back into us.
You know, our studios are very close to Dillingham, as you know, driving over here. We
Oh,
see all that
no.
work. We experience it. You know, you mentioned perhaps finding a utility that was not supposed to be there. What have been some of the unexpected hurdles that you found? Because we know that, you know, time after time, this area has always been flagged as the part that would be the hardest to build.
Exactly. As our contractor is digging up those roads, they're finding utilities that are supposed to minimum be 3 feet underground, they're inches. We're just saw cutting the concrete sidewalk so that we can dig that out and open up the trench, and we're hitting the lines at inches. So, but again, our stakeholders, so let's say whether it's a gas line or water line, we call the utility immediately. They come out and they help us. So, or a utility that, it was supposed to be 3 feet over, according to the as-built, it's not. And so we have to stop, redesign, and then our contractor has been really good. So I know it must be frustrating for you folks that, man, they keep flip-flopping. The Mackay lanes are closed and it's the Malka lanes, but that's because of our partnership with our contractor. Instead of sitting down and said, you know what, Hart, we found something unexpected, you figure it out. No, they're saying, can we jump over here and start work while we figure out the solution here? And so that's how we're minimizing delays on the project.
And so that is just this Dillingham corridor. Looking forward, I would imagine that the same sort of issues could present itself in the downtown area with aging infrastructure and things like that. What are you anticipating as you look forward beyond just Dillingham and as you move into the urban corridor?
Actually, no. Downtown is
interesting.
almost done. So we had 2 contracts, downtown and Dillingham. Downtown is going to be finished in September timeframe, so on schedule, and actually about $60 million under budget. Dillingham is we might see a little bit of slippage, and it's dealing with, like I said, we have to redesign things, but even supply chain issues. But I don't anticipate problems in the downtown area. Dillingham is the critical path of the project, so whatever we can do to help them, that's what we're here to do.
You know, and speaking of the downtown area and beyond, there had been some talk early on, and we had discussed this with you, of perhaps putting a station on hold just because they needed to have the money and building it later. Are we looking at building according to plan? Are you making any adaptations or adjustments looking at that last leg? Not the final, because we know we want to get to Ala Moana.
True. No, all of those stations along that Dillingham downtown corridor, it's in place. So when that procurement out on the street, it is that all of those stations. So we're not talking about that truncated scope, the 1 mile and two stations, but hopefully if the bids come in according to our independent cost estimate and the GET, TAT remains strong, we may have the option to award that that last leg to this contractor. So the base bid in the procurement right now is to Civic Center, and then there's a bid additive to go to Ala Moana. So if the base bid comes in low enough and our funds, we look like we have enough, we can award that same contractor to do that extra leg to Ala Moana.
You know, as we talk about just some of the impact of the rail housing drivers, it's also impacting businesses in the area. And we're seeing, of course, a lot of the businesses here in the Dillingham area that has been affected. How are you guys mitigating that, speaking and working with businesses that are directly impacted by where things are at right now?
Yes, so we do have monthly, or maybe it's bi-monthly now because the attendance was so low, community meetings, so that they can voice their concerns. Obviously, they can call us 24/7. We have a 24/7 hotline, but we have not received complaints. You know, if one particular business calls us, gives us their issues, we immediately address it. So there's really only been about 2 on the Dillingham corridor that has voiced concerns, and we get out there and address them. But other than that, we haven't received many.
You know, going back to the issue on the vacancies, not necessarily the board's criticism, but just the ability to get the work done that you need to. This is a massive project, and when you're looking at having over 36 vacancies, are you able to actually do the work that you need to do, given the hiring challenges that you've had?
Yes, absolutely, because as I said, we augment with the consultants. We don't do that as a first line of defense because they're more expensive. The salaries are a little bit higher, and then on top of that, you have to pay overhead and profit, but failure is not an option. So we will hire at the higher salary if we have to. But our HR team is fairly new, and so they're getting their feet under them. So there's only 3 of them doing all of this HR recruiting, and I am proud to say they're starting to get their wind in their sails. We have 4 new employees that we've made offers to. 2 of them are returnees, actually, so I'm proud of that. So to criticize that, I can't hold on to employees, well, that's not true. People leave for different reasons, but we have 2 that are returning and coming back, and hopefully they can start within the next month, because once they accept our offer, there's paperwork we have to do and pass it on to the Department of Human Resources and then start those employees up. But like I said, I have a lot of confidence in our team, and we will augment with consultants if we have to.
One of the other things that has come up that maybe you've received some criticism from was just your overall transparency with the board.
Yes.
Did that catch you off guard? How do you feel when you what were your thoughts of when you heard that criticism?
Yes, so I did write a response to my evaluation. That one really did catch me off guard, because I pride myself on being open, honest, and transparent with you folks whoever I go and speak to. My deputy always kicks me. Sometimes he says I talk too much, but that's my nature. And so I was a little confused by that. I did ask for clarification, which I did not get any response. But one thing that they did mention was the full funding grant agreement process, but I had no control over that. That was completely in FTA's control, and they told me whatever they could, and I would share that as whatever information I had with the board. But honestly, even FTA didn't quite know the process, because it's never been done before. So they thought, we'll get this done in a few months. No, we had to do a full environmental evaluation. It had to go up the chain of command of FTA, had to go to Congress. So that's the only thing I could think of, but that was not, to me, fair, if that's what I'm being dinged on. And the other one would be the procurement. I'm the contracting officer. I don't even know what's going on. I have to stay separate. So it's my team that's doing the procurement. And then it comes to me when it's time to sign the contract. But I don't know specifically what they were referring to and where I wasn't open, honest, and transparent.
You know, Ryan did mention the council and the support you receive from them. We know that in the past, the mayor has vocalized a lot of support for you as well. Have you spoken to him about all of that that's going on this?
No, I haven't. We really haven't had too much contact. When we go to the town hall meetings, of course, everyone wants to talk to the mayor, but no, there's been no one-on-one discussions about what's going on.
Just overall, as you look at your time here with HART and just all that you've done, how would you just assess the work that you did personally? I mean, just the evolution that the project has taken on and the assessment that you think that you're doing overall.
I'd like to say I think I've done a good job, trying to right the ship. The negativity that we used to receive when I first came in has subsided quite a bit. You don't see us in the news as much, unfortunately, now, because of what's going on between myself and the board and my contract. But on the project as a whole, I think, I did not do this alone. There is no way all of this could have been accomplished without that stellar HART Ohana and, of course, the stakeholders. So, yeah.
Yeah, and building on that, because when we've had you on in the past, we've talked about how you couldn't go to, the grocery store without being stopped in the aisle and being talked to, about it. Yes. How have those conversations changed over time?
It continues. I thought after the opening it would subside, but it continues. And actually, since that whole incident with the board being so publicly televised, more so, people are coming up to me and saying, "You are doing a terrific job. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't let anyone, get you down. Just continue what you're doing and keep your head up high." So now it's even more so. I would say about 3 times a week versus once a week.
Just final question as we wrap up here. In the next few weeks and months, what's going to be your priority right now as you look into just the things that need to get done, and what are you focusing on right now?
Yes, that award of that City Center Guideway Station contract. So the bids are due, I want to say, in July, and we want to award in August, give notice to proceed in September. So whether I stay or not, I want to put the HART organization in the best situation that I can. So that's going to be my focus, is that award of the City Center Guideway Station, and of course keep Dillingham moving. That's the critical path of the entire project.
I think we all appreciate that. Lori Kahikina, HART CEO, thank
you.
you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And Natalie Uwasa from the HART Board joins us right after this. You're watching Spotlight Now.
Welcome back to Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now as we continue our discussion and conversations focusing on the Honolulu Rail project. We want to, of course, always encourage those of you who are watching to engage with us. You can enter your questions and comments on our Facebook page or by scanning the QR code that you see on the bottom of your screen.
Natalie Uwasa is now in the studio with us. She is a HART board member and community advocate who has spoken publicly on a number of issues relating to transportation. And on that QR code and the viewer engagement, Natalie, we want to start with a question actually that comes from the public. And this is from Raquel Hill Achu saying that she's watched Lori Kahikina turn things around with this project. She's held herself and the project with nothing but integrity. Her question is, what's going on with the board? So I guess we'll start there.
Well, let's start with a loaded question. So first of all, I have to make it clear that I'm speaking on my own behalf. I'm not talking on behalf of the board. So anybody who's followed the HART board meetings knows that there are a couple of members who have been giving Lori a very difficult time. And I think Lori touched on part of this, but you know, I have always been concerned about the fiscal side of rail. And I'm concerned now that because of everything that's going out, there's some speculation, but there's a lot of animosity. I'm not sure what the correct word is, but that is going to impact the bids that are going to be coming in soon. That's my fear anyway, my concern. So I'm not sure. Did I answer that question?
I think you did, yeah.
And just your overall thoughts, I mean, with this public exchange that happened, how do you think that impacts the project as a whole, as you were talking about some of the issues, which is the vacancies and trying to get these positions filled? We heard from Lori saying that there are some people who are not committing to positions because of her own uncertainty. How do you think that overall her position being in limbo is impacting the project as a whole?
Well, it's obviously, I think, a negative impact, because who wants to come work for a project now where everything is kind of topsy-turvy, up in the air? The board hasn't made any kind of decision on Lori's contract. We're just a little more than a half a year out from the termination of her agreement, and I think, people are looking for some stability there. And so I'm not surprised, given the problems that other agencies are having, the other industries are having across the board, hiring people. It's only being exacerbated by the board and their discussions that they're having with Lori and also behind doors.
When we asked her if she characterized this as bullying, she says she does. She thinks it's bullying and harassment. How would you characterize what's happening?
I would say that's a very good word, because not this last meeting, but the meeting before, Lori had actually asked to go into executive session, and the Human Resource Committee chair said no. And so all of that was put in the public. I mean, anybody can go look at that meeting now. And they berated her. They gave her negative comments. And I think it's really, really important for the public to understand the good things that she's done. And some of these things that the board members are knocking her down for, I believe, are not fair. And so, yes, I have no doubt that she feels like she's being bullied, and it's not good for anybody.
Just looking at the project as a whole, you've been on the board since 2021. How have you seen things change or evolve over this time, during Lori's tenure, but also just the different public perception, how things with this project are moving along? What are some of the key differences that you've noticed during that time?
Well, first of all, right off the bat, Lori started with cutting the waste. And for me, that's a big thing. When there are people who are not pulling their weight, or at that time, actually, there was the P3 had just been canceled. So there were people on board who weren't going to be needed for several years. So I believe that was a good thing. Lori looked out for contracts that were not in the best interest. So right away, again, off the bat, she canceled that NAN Inc. contract, which was an IDIQ. Now that means indefinite duration, indefinite quantity. And that is typically used when there's a need for signal lights at various locations. It doesn't work well in the rail project. And we had 25% of that contract spent, almost $100 million, with only 8% of the work done. Now, Lori is the one who terminated that agreement. So, I think that right from the very beginning was a very good start. And then we've seen with the acceptance of the recovery plan and the revised full funding grant agreement that Lori has worked really hard at fixing relationships that had been torn down or, just non-existent anymore because of the way things were handled at HART prior to her coming on board.
Obviously, you support her, and it seems like you admire the work that she's done. What are your concerns if indeed she decides, let's say they decide to renew her contract, if she decides, this isn't the place for me anymore, and she decides to walk away, what are your concerns about the future of the project?
Well, it really would depend then on who steps in to fill those shoes. And I think given the environment that the board has put her in, that it will be really hard to get somebody as good into that position. So my concern is that, we will see higher costs, we will see schedules that perhaps are not met, and I'm just really concerned. I don't blame Lori 100 at all for feeling like this is not the place for her anymore, because we've had several board meetings where her contract was discussed or issues related to her management. And the board has deferred and deferred and deferred. And so that message alone is like, well, we don't want you. And then for me, the question is, why not? What is going on in the background? And, you know, I want to share something that I got from a contractor, Nanning. One of their project managers sent me 3 letters from their project managers. Now, these folks have been on the job since the time of Grabowsis. They've seen every executive director, and they had no qualms about saying that Lori was the best, that she has made big strides in improving how rail is managed, how the people are managed, and doing the right thing. And I just want to say this. Lori does not play games. That's what was told to me in an email by one of these folks. Lori is absolutely instrumental, and losing her would be a huge loss to HART. Now, that was told to me by a project manager who coincidentally had their contract nixed. But they're back in and working with Lori, and they had these positive comments to make. Now, my concern with what's been happening here is that these letters that I was provided were dated May 6th, 7th, 8th. What is that, 2 weeks ago, over 2 weeks ago? And they had asked specifically that those letters be provided to the board. And as far as I'm aware, they have not been provided to board members. Now, typically when testimony comes in, it's given to all the board members. I have not gotten anything. And so I'm left wondering what is going on, and why are they not sharing this positive information with board members who are discussing Lori and her contract and her management style?
Well, we know that there have been the disagreements with specific members on the board, but do you get the overall sense that there is still support for her beyond you on the board? You know, what do you think the overall feeling is? I mean, we talked about it continuing to get deferred about her contract renewal, but is there a way, or do you have a litmus on what the general board is thinking as a whole?
Well, I think that several members do support her. Kiko Bukowski actually made the comment at one of the meetings that, hey, why isn't this contract put on? We should be discussing this. And then he also had questions about some communications this last meeting Friday. So, and then just in general, I think there are a couple other board members who support her as well. You know, I find that in Hawaii and probably particularly in Honolulu, it's difficult for some people to step out and be as vocal as I am. And so you may not hear that from them directly out in public. But I do believe that there is support for her beyond just me.
You know, you asked the question, and I would like to just ask it back to you, which is what is going on? What do you think is going on? Why do you think that there seems to be a campaign, maybe just of a few members, to, you know, if not oust her, make things very difficult?
That's a really good question, and one that I've asked myself. And in fact, my husband has asked me some questions as well. So I look at what's been happening, and one of the big explosive things was the departure of the project manager, who's basically the third in line. And my husband asks me, well, you know, why hasn't he stepped forward to say something? I mean, he's the subject of these discussions. Understanding that he is on the mainland, he's got some family issues, but still he has that opportunity to say something, and he hasn't. And the only thing, and some people are probably not going to like this, but the only thing that I can figure that makes sense is that he is being, I don't know what to say, asked perhaps, or people are thinking that perhaps he would come on board, because think about it, you know, he could get over $300,000 salary. Lori makes $275,000, no extra transportation, no housing allowance, nothing. She declined her bonus. over $300,000. He's on the mainland now, and they could say, well, we'll give you a moving allowance, we'll give you a housing allowance, and that to me is the only thing that makes sense, because he knows the project in and out, and he could potentially take over. I don't know how his management skills are as far as leading a whole organization, but when my husband asked me that and I thought about it, that was the only thing that would really make sense.
And to be clear, this is your personal suspicion. You haven't spoken to this individual. You don't know if he's gunning for this job or not.
Exactly. It's all just what I have pieced together, totally my opinion.
Beyond just where things are at right now with the leadership, what are the other concerns that you have about the project as a whole, HART and the board, some of the major decisions and things that you continue to keep an eye out for as this project continues?
Thank you. So a lot of people know I'm a certified public accountant, certified fraud examiner, and one of the things that I've been trying to push for a long time is to at least have an internal audit function, and so that has kind of been put on the hold temporarily, I hope, and hope that we can get that into place soon. But there have been a lot of allegations of fraud, waste, and abuse. I mean, it happens all over the place. Anybody who thinks that it's not happening is naive. The only question is how much. So, and even with Lori in place, I mean, it's just a thing. And so my concern is still the money, and making sure that we protect it, that we have good procedures in place, that we have good oversight. And so I think that's lacking, but would like to get that into place. And I do need to talk to Lori about implementing a fraud policy at HART.
Okay, we are almost out of time, but before we let you go, you have been a critic of this project in the past, and now you're a part of the board. And so given sort of, the access that you have, do you feel, given the conflict that we're seeing between the board and the CEO, that the public should still have confidence in the project, in the way that it's being managed, and the board itself?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think the public should have more confidence in Lori. I read public comments and I see them knocking her down, and I wish that they understood everything that she's done. As far as confidence in the board, right now my own confidence is very low, just because of what's happened the last few months, 6 months or so. But I do hope that Lori stays on. I hope that we can move past this, that the board sees that this is not a good thing, and that hopefully all the board members will get those good letters, and we'll be able to work through this so that we can continue on as efficiently and as best that we can.
Natalie Iwasa, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We'll be back right after this.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, we continue on in our discussion here, focusing in on the Honolulu Rail project. We want to now focus on Skyline itself and the operations that's happening right now. We want to welcome in John Uchi. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us an update on how things are going. First off, let's just talk about the rail itself and Skyline ridership, how things are going. Almost a year, a few months away from a year in. What are we seeing here with the Skyline?
I think we have a system that was recently born and presented to our residents who have waited a very long time. It's been 55 years since the first talk of any high-capacity rail project for our island of Oahu. And last year, on June 30th, we opened the system. And I think, as with the birth of anything, you grow into it. You learn, you kind of have to learn how to walk before you need to learn how to fly. And I think Skyline often just gets judged for ridership, ridership and cost for construction. But this is only the first phase. And I think the city and everyone who actually even likes it or doesn't like it would say that the over 10 miles we have now, it just does not go far enough. It doesn't get us past a traffic choke point, a congestion choke point in town. But in the vein of that Hamilton play, Just You Wait, we will be, by the end of next year, we expect to open the next segment of Skyline, which is going to be hugely transformative. Maybe I should just be more tempered about it. It'll be great because we will go another 4 stations and we will touch what I'm trying to brand as West Honolulu, West Kalihi. We will reach Middle Street and therefore also hit stations at very important areas such as the Makalapa Pearl Harbor Station and the Lelepaua Daniel K. Inouye International Airport.
Okay, I know you don't necessarily want to focus on the numbers themselves, but let's ask how many people are actually using the rail system now, and how do you expect that to change with that second segment?
So in the first nearly 11 miles, on an average daily weekday, we're seeing about 3,500 riders a day. And we know going into that before, we looked at what that ridership corridor does. So if you look at just between the Halawa Aloha Stadium Station and let's just say Waipahu and or Kapolei, before Skyline opened, we knew that we had about 10,000 transit riders that we already knew that already rode our buses in that very busy corridor. So we expected some to shift, and we knew that that was kind of if we just took our bus riders and everybody rode Skyline, we would have about that many that would have the pleasure of, now shortening their commute and using a different mode above all the congestion. We see certain things have a very direct effect on ridership. Of course, it doesn't please us that we opened the Halawa Aloha Stadium Station to a stadium that is now closed. But we do, again, we're not looking short-sighted, we're looking long view. That new Aloha Stadium Entertainment District with all the housing and other things that are planned, that's going to be a great location for this anchor station and all the activity that's going to be around it. But even on days that we see the swap meet, for example, we can see a notable uptick. So we'll see, on those days, we'll see ridership approaching about like 3,900 on those days. We also really want to make sure that Skyline is available for people. And when there are special events out in the community, we'll extend hours to support that, like Leeward Community College graduations, large-scale events like the Prince Kuhio Parade out in Kapolei. We want to make sure the system is open and available.
Has there been any unexpected or unforeseen circumstances that have caused you to relook at how you're going to operate in this next segment? I mean, what are some of the things that you've learned over this last almost 1 year since Skyline has launched?
I think one of the things we really want to look at as we approach this next segment, the game changer here, obviously, is the airport. And when you look at how much airport access this gives to West Side residents, I mean, I think a lot of times in Oahu and Honolulu, we sometimes get accused of forgetting about the local residents and catering towards the visitors. And in this case, people will come out of the airport, see that there is Skyline Rail, and think, oh yeah, I want to go to Waikiki on it. Well, you can't yet, but you can go all the way west. So it's for the benefit of our residents at that point that you no longer have to joust and jockey to figure out how to pick somebody up at the airport. You can have them take a Skyline ride out to the neighborhood that you're in and just pick them up at the station. And those small little subtle pivots, I think, is where people are going to find a lot of value in our extended system.
Talking about walking before you run and following up on Ryan's question, how is the testing going to be different for the second segment? Because we saw that went over a long period of time and there were emergency drills and things like that. Are we expected to see it at that same kind of clip? Or have you learned enough from the first segment that you don't necessarily need to be, not necessarily as thorough, but doesn't need to take as long on the second?
Well, nothing is easy, right? What's interesting is we will be having similar exercises for our emergency first responders, and that's actually going on tonight. So we're having, ongoing training. What we anticipate, the first time we do anything is hard, right? And this second time, I think the challenge is going to be to maintain the operations of a very frequent Skyline system. At the same time, we have activities going beyond that. So I think that pressure is on our operators to be able to do all the testing that they need beyond east of the Halawa Aloha Stadium Station and still maintain quality of service along the existing alignment. It's quite a balancing act.
Well, no doubt you've been listening to our conversation this morning, and I'm not going to ask you as a deputy director of a city position to jump in and give your opinion on what's happening between the board and with HART Chair Lori Kahikina. But I would just like to get your overall assessment of the relationship that your department has had with HART, knowing that there is and there has to be a lot of communication going on between when the keys are delivered, timelines, schedules. How would you characterize the relationship that you have with the HART CEO, Lori Kahikina, as well as the entire HART organization as you continue to get these new assets delivered?
Very much a family. I mean, if we talk about Ohana, right, I think it's DTS is the brother and HART is the sister. You know, sister is preparing everything for brother. And I think that kind of, it's not just like a baton pass. This is a very complicated project. And as things happen, as things evolve, we see things happen on the HART side that might be a construction decision or a value proposition. And yet we look at it as DTS. I'm going to have to operate this thing for 100 years. So I think that type of our ability to communicate under those circumstances has never been better. We have very clear lines of communication such that someone's very off-the-cuff value or engineering decision doesn't hamstring DTS in terms of our long-term operations down the line. And I think there's so much value to that. I know Lori talked a lot about the stakeholders, of which DTS and the city is really a stakeholder to this massive project. And so we really do value the ability that we can get down in the weeds and disagree about things, but not only the disagreement, but that we can resolve things and work towards a solution.
When the mayoral debates were happening, there had been talk about ending the rail at Middle Street, and that Middle Street was sort of this flagship station. How are you changing or adding more resources to Middle Street so that we know it's not the end of the line, but it'll be kind of the end for now? Yeah. So what are you doing in terms of adding more bus services or making it so that it can be utilized in a much more meaningful way?
My face is lighting up because this is the part of my job I really like. How do we restructure our bus system to make it the best when linked arms with Skyline? And I think one of the things I've always said, but maybe the message doesn't get out, Middle Street often becomes like this place where people plant a flag. And clearly, because it makes sense, it's going to be the temporary terminus for the rail line. But Middle Street and the Kalihi Transit Center there at the corner of Kamehameha and Middle, it is not a regional jumping off point for transportation or transit. It is an amazing gateway to all access to Kalihi. And in that sense, Middle Street is a gateway to Kalihi. You get School Street, you get the King Street neighborhood, you get the Dillingham neighborhood. What we are planning to do is do a lot of what we call bus rapid transit services. So a lot of very frequent express services that are scheduled to pick up the Skyline passengers. And I think we're going to focus a lot of that effort on the Lagoon Drive station. From there, you'll be able to hop on an express bus to UH Manoa, to downtown, and directly to Waikiki. And I think that's going to be each of those frequent buses that operate, it's going to be like we're extending Skyline just on rubber tires and just by bus. And that's a big for now. So we look at that as a way to expand Skyline's reach by just offering a frequent alternative once you get off of Skyline.
So while Middle Street will be the end, really the focal point for further transportation might be a stop before that.
That's correct. And Middle Street is still a great leaping off point for Kalihi, because when you get to Middle Street, you can get to the School Street neighborhood, you can get up into the valley, you can get to all these other places. But if you just think about the configuration of Middle Street, if you get off there, it is really hard, even in your car, to get back on a freeway or to get somewhere if you're going a longer distance. Like if you're going to UH Manoa, you have to kind of drive through a neighborhood to just get back onto the freeway for a longer distance connection. So we want to have people get off a little bit earlier and make sure that they can make very frequent connections and get to their final destinations quickly via bus rapid transit.
We are almost out of time, but before we let you go, I want to ask for those folks who have not yet had an opportunity to ride the Skyline, what would you say to them? And you know, I'm imagining that you're going to encourage them to experience it, even if it is a train to nowhere for them for now.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think, you know, via shows like Spotlight, people have kind of identified me in the community as someone who just is on the front edge of all this, you know, rail tomfoolery, right? And people have approached me in public, in restaurants and things like that, and they always tell me like, hey, how come this? How come that? How come you guys don't do that? How come you guys never do this? And I say, oh, did you experience all this stuff while writing it? And they'll be like, oh, I haven't written it yet. And so I say, well, go write it, and then we talk story. But the bottom line is we've had a hard time getting people on board, but we want to overcome all the divisiveness. You know, I mean, it's not like this is a project where we invest a lot of time and money. We can't just hit Control-Z, undo, and then it's all going to go away tomorrow. So we want to make the best of the project that we have now, and we want to welcome everybody on board.
Okay, time to go take a ride. John Nochi, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
We'll see you right after the break. Stay with us. You're watching Spotlight Now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, very interesting and jam-packed show here on Spotlight Now as we caught up with Lori Kahikina, the CEO of HART. We heard from her as she shared her frustrations about some of the criticism that she has received from HART board chair Colleen Hanabusa, that public debate that she said felt could have been handled behind closed doors, and ultimately a decision that she has to make is if this is a job she even wants to continue on with.
Yeah, her contract expires at the end of the year. The HART board has not decided, or not at least publicly, made an offer to renew or not renew. She is in limbo, but you heard her say that this is bullying, this is harassment, this is not a productive work environment. She says that she worries it'll impact the bids that they're waiting on. We're talking about millions of public dollars that are yet to be spent on this project. And even if she is offered that opportunity, she may not want to continue. Also interesting to get Natalie Iwasa's perspective on this fight.
Yeah, someone who sits on the board and really you can hear from her today, a very strong advocate of Lori Kahikina and all that she is doing, even offering up information about letters of support that project managers who have been with the project from the beginning now speaking out and showing their support behind Lori Kahikina, but also saying that that is something that the board has not yet received. They haven't seen those letters of recommendation and support. So interesting to hear her perspective of how maybe someone on the HART board is also perceiving this conflict between the chair as well as the CEO.
Yeah, and you heard Lori Kahikina defend herself when it comes to these recruitment and retention issues, also the issue of transparency. She says she does not understand the transparency comment in particular. As to the recruitment and retention, she said that she's doing the best she can, and she feels very confident in the team that she has. She said when you look at the vacancies, you also have to remember that a lot of the people who are working on the project are contractors, and that is really filling in the gaps for now. It's a more expensive method, but it is helping to get the job done.
Yeah, and also great to hear from John Nouchi about just where things are at. You heard from him about the progress, how things continue to move forward with this next section that will continue on to Middle Street. The city really expecting that to be a launching off point where they can see an increase of ridership because of that area will now include the Honolulu airport. And you just hear his excitement overall about just this project and the continuation that they will be able to service more people in the city and county of Honolulu.
Yeah, and I like what he said. Go ride it, and then we'll talk story. He wants
I
everybody
still
to...
haven't ridden it, so can't criticize.
He says that he wants everyone to experience it first before actually levying any criticism. Next week, we are turning our focus to the legislative session, talking with two leaders in the House and Senate.
That's right. We'll be catching up with Speaker Scott Saiki as well as President Ron Kochi to hear about their assessment of how things went this legislative session, and also talks of a special session and if that is something they agree with. Thanks for watching Spotlight Now. We'll see you right back here next week. Aloha.
Aloha.